Well, g'day everyone. It's the Two Ordinary Cops, and we are back again for another week. Damo, mate, how are you?
Good, mate. Good. What's happening in Brizzy?
Oh, mate, not too bad. It's been windy the last couple of days, but still, I think both of us are actually flat out at the moment. It's
Oh yeah. Oh, it's just silly, but that's all right. Isn't it?
I honestly, and look, the police was busy. When you look back and the work we did, in those, well, I suppose pretty upheaval times. But at the moment, mate, it's just going crazy. And I always go through this stage in my life where I go, you know what, I'm going to quieten down for a bit, and I do. But
Mm.
then a few months later, I find something else to entertain me, and I just get into it, and then you just kick along,
Go it
and
up again.
yep.
I found that what I like these days, instead of the old days of just being go, 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 and then you stop on leave and it takes a while for the wheels to stop spinning. I like to be busy and then I like to do nothing.
Yeah,
It's pretty good. And you sort of never do nothing. You always do the little odd jobs, but you just take it easy. So, no, it's all good, mate. It's going all right.
yeah. So,
Yeah. What is the plan today, my friend?
well, mate, we've got a couple of things we're going to talk about. But before we do, well, actually, first off, we'll start off the 18th of October. We're going to remind everybody until that date comes up. So meet us down at the Goldie. I will give you the location. I am actually travelling down there. I've got a job down there on Saturday, and I've decided to take my lovely girl down there, and we're going to stay the night. And then we're going to have a look at a couple of venues we got basically pointed out that might be worthwhile and actually holding it at. So, mate, there'll be more in that in the coming weeks.
Yep.
Mate, and I do believe at the moment we have $150 on the bar from
Yeah,
paid
that's not going to
cards.
last long, Schultzy.
No.
That'll get me to dinner. Yeah.
So, look, I think Damo, you've got the same reputation as me. I had a very good reputation when I was fines master for handing out cartons. So look, guys, get in contact with us, bring them in, and come along and pay your carton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, dish them
So
out.
at the moment, we've got you, me, and Damo Duggs.
Who
So
owe cartons.
yeah,
Yeah, we've got a
yeah,
few there coming. No, that's all good. That's all
yeah.
good. We'll get there.
That we will, mate. And I believe you've got a shout out for us.
I do. So, my mate, and I haven't spoken to him. So, he's currently on tour overseas. And as a result, I won't mention his name again. But my old sailor mate who's now retired from the police force, he was the police auxiliary I mentioned in the last one. He's got in contact and just said, "Yep, no, thanks. It was all good fun." And yeah, he listens to the podcast too, which is good. And mate, I'll just say it again. He was just great. He was so good. So it was bloody good to see him. He's overseas with his wife. They're sort of touring around and they're putting things on Facebook and stuff, so everyone can sort of follow the tour a bit. But it's just really good stuff. So yeah, it was glad to hear from him. Glad he's doing well.
Mate, that's awesome. And look, mate, we've got actually another shout out. As people may realise, we're shaking up our social media a bit, and it's a work in progress. And thanks to Kate for helping us out with that. It's very much appreciated. And she sent us through on one of the new platforms we've got. O'Reilly Crib, yeah, he said, mate, he just big shout out to him. He said, recently started listening from episode 1, just joined the New South Wales Police Force recently. Involved in a critical incident in his first 8 shifts. And he said, people often ask me how I felt, and I tell them your podcast explains it to a T. So thanks very much, mate. That's it's nice to hear that sort of feedback, and it's nice that we resonate even with the younger cops. I think of today. I mean, it's obviously you're going through the same emotions and all that sort of stuff. It's nice that to hear that something we're talking about is helping out those, especially those young coppers, as we were helped out. When by those older coppers, and they took us under their wing when we saw our first bad incidents. So, mate, anything more you want to say about that?
Yeah, mate. No, you covered that pretty well. It's good. I'm glad. I'm glad that what we did say, because you got to remember, read the title of the podcast. There's nothing flash about us. We just say what we experienced. So it's good to know that that's correct. And I mean, we've had plenty of feedback that is correct. So it sort of legitimizes what we're doing there a bit. And chin up. There's plenty of support out there, and there's plenty of people who've done it. And just remember that any response is normal. So, but if it's starting to get a bit hard, like definitely, don't wait too long. Sort of talk about it early. Seek out some help if you need help for those critical stuff, because a lot of people can't comprehend a critical incident. But a truly critical incident will burn into your brain, and you'll see it, and you'll never forget it.
Yeah. Mate, I'm just going to touch on something, and I might have spoke about this previously, but my cousin, he was, what do you call them? They just help out. What do you call them? Storm carrots.
The SES, mate.
Yeah, basically, they go along. They're volunteers, and they go along to accidents and all that sort of thing. And he went to a very serious one out near Kingaroy, where some children were killed, and it really, really messed him up. And anyway, I offered to sit there and have a talk to him and all that, and he was going through his own issues and talking to psychologists and all that sort of thing. But he had a really hard time dealing with it, and I think, and I mentioned, I said, at least in the police, we had our support network, people we could talk to. Unfortunately, for people that, do that volunteering, they don't have that same support network. Every time we go to work, every time we have a beer after work, every time, you're sitting there chatting to your colleagues, it's a big support network. But I think the importance we can get from that is what you and I talk about all the time, and that's the police club, and that's what it was all about. And it's amazing how he was affected for many, many years, and we've seen that and worse, in our career. But I think it's really important to just come back to talking to people who know what you're going through.
Yeah, and that is really hard going for those guys. Like you say, they're the volunteers, so they just finish that job, and then everyone breaks away from the shed, and away they go. So that debrief is definitely important. You've got to do it. It has to be done. You have to normalise that experience. So that's the advice. I mean, I'm a volunteer firefighter myself, and I can tell you, we just come back and it's like, oh, it's time to go home. So you get to the shed, you put the truck away, basically make sure it's filled up, make sure it's watered up, and just go home. But I mean, I haven't had a critical incident in the RFS, but others have, and that's where I think I probably will have to take a bit of leadership there on making sure that we all do sit around and talk about it. So
yeah, mate, that's just something I thought I'd mention here. But mate, what we're going to do, we missed one question from Jack in relation to doing all our Q&A over the last two episodes, mate. And I thought we probably should just go back and touch on it. I know we've spoken about it a little bit before, but I'm going to hand it over to you. He said, how do you find sharing stories and experiences with other first responders outside the Northern Territory? So do you want to just give a another brief explanation of how we? I mean, I don't know we've spoken about it a bit, but just a quick overview.
Oh, yeah, I found it great. It was good. It was always good to catch up. The first time I really had a bit to do with interstaters was in Tennant Creek, mostly because you'd see the odd detective come up, but they were mostly with major crime, so we didn't have a lot to do with them. And that was detectives coming from interstate who were doing extraditions, taking people back to wherever they came from. For me, Tennant Creek was really good because we had a pretty good working relationship with the Mount Isa coppers. So not just uniform, but also detectives. We did a cross-border operation at Avon Downs in would have been 2014. 2012, 2013, 14, something like that. Those years, there was a couple of those operations. And we just, at first, just sort of working out who's who in the zoo. And then what happens is there's a realisation of familiarity straight away. There's a shared experience already, and you sort of go, oh, yeah, I know, I get you. So, and both people sort of get that a bit. So, we're meeting the Queensland cops, and we were the NT coppers, and very quickly you go, yeah, no, they're brothers and sisters. It's all good.
Yeah.
And, it was funny. On one of the occasions, we'd had a missing person, and the search and rescue was going to take place with an aircraft going up from Barclay Homestead to try and find this missing fella. And at the same time that happened, we were actually doing a cross-border drug operation at Avon Downs, or just at the Queensland border, so just east of Avon Downs. And anyway, we got notification out there that the body had been located and this fellow had taken his own life, hung himself off the side of a ute, and they'd found him with the aircraft. So they said, you guys are already out there. Can you respond to that and sort of handle the initial scene and get that sort of wrapped up? So I got sent away to deal with it, and one of the Queensland detectives just came with me. So it was a bit of an extra hand. And anyway, we get to the body, and the poor bugger, he'd been hanging for a long time. So, like when I say a long time, 4 weeks. So he'd been hanging in the hot sun out there for 4 weeks off the side of this car. So we got to the body, and there was a heap of probationary connies, or just junior constables who'd come out from Tennant Creek for the search and rescue and had now come to the scene. So we secured the scene, and our senior crime officer, who was a very experienced old legend from Victoria, who'd come up to the territory and basically just made Tennant Creek his home, he came out and did the photography and did the scene process. It was very obviously not suspicious. It was clearly a suicide. And anyway, we recovered the body and got that process started, the identification process started. And I remember this is a funny story in a terrible circumstance. So I remember we put him in the body bag, and you've got to remember, nature takes its course. He'd been hanging for 4 weeks, somewhat mummified, pretty badly decomposing. So we've put him down in the body bag, and as we're doing that, I can see everyone's grimacing because the smell was pretty overwhelming. Anyway, I'm leaning over the top of him, sort of going, "Hey mate, can you grab this guy? Can you?" And giving sort of just directing traffic for the probies around me to get some work done. And as I did that, a fly came straight off the body and went straight down my throat. And anyway, so that's as bad as eating a fly gets. I spun around and just let loose. As I did that, the entire crowd let loose. All of us threw up. It would have been an interesting crime scene to come and do. What's all this vomit? Oh, yeah, that's the cops. So anyway, we were hacking on that. And the poor old Queensland detective, he did the same thing. He just spun around and had a hurl. And anyway, we did our job, and the funeral services were there, so we put the body in that. We zipped up the bag, and we broke the scene down, and we went back to we were sleeping out at Avon Downs, so we went back to Avon, and everyone else went back to Tennant with the body. Anyway, he gets in the car, and he held his professionalism in front of all the other guys, but when he got in the car with me, he's like, "Take me back to Queensland, this is bullshit." So he was good. He was a really good copper. And he was taking the piss at that point. But he said, "Oh, mate," he said, "that smell had me on the edge. I don't know how you were standing so close, but when you ate that fly and threw up, I could not. That was the end of me."
Oh,
yeah, well, that was the end of me too.
It's amazing how, I suppose, hard your stomachs become.
You sort of get in the zone. Yeah, you just sort of you got a job to do and you just do it. So I mean, that was one story with the interstaters, but. I also did an extradition to Mount Isa. I missed out on all the extraditions. I've spoken about this in the past where we'd do rock, paper, scissors for who was going to go on the job. I mean, the case officer would go, but then it was rock, paper, scissors for who was going to go with them. And I missed out on a few. Really, really depressing stuff. Anyway, so then we finally get one to Mount Isa, and it was by road to pick up this white pedophile out of Mount Isa and drive him back in the back seat of a Prado with him talking the whole way back. It was like, "Dude, shut up, or you're going to go missing in the desert." Anyway, it was so that was mine. But we had a really good night there with the coppers, all the detectives. They were pretty busy. They did have a job on, but they made a point of, once they'd peeled away at like 10 o'clock at night, they rang just to see what we were up to, and we were about to go to bed, having a quiet beer. Anyway, we ended up out till about 1 a.m. at the local. We started in town at one of their pubs, and then we ended up at the little police club they've got. Bloody good police club. It's got accommodation above the bar, and then there's a swimming pool out the back. And it was all paid for by members of the club and with fundraising through the club through the years. We're talking 20, 30 years ago. And, that was still the leftover leftover place that was there. But they ran a good ship over there. It was good fun. And, we had a good night there. And we had our obligatory hungover appearance in court in the Mount Isa Magistrates Court to receive the extradition warrant from the magistrate, and then jump in the car and away we went.
Mate, you've just brought up a memory, and I think the best thing we had at the Catherine Police Club was a small blow-up pool.
Oh, yeah, that was, from memory, that was Melbourne Cup Day 2011.
It was.
Yeah, someone had this blow up pool, and we ended up having a session. And that was, I think, night shift were there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when CIB knocked off, and then we were kicking on, and then 7 o'clock at night, night shift, day shift. So night shift from the previous night was still there because it was their last day, and then day shift turned up, and we stayed there for hours. It was a huge night, a great time. I remember the shift sergeant dropped heaps of us home in a cage. We're all hanging out the back of the police cage, getting dropped off home. It was brilliant.
Well, mate, I still remember that because I was actually in for court. I think I was out of Cracker Island at the time or somewhere out bush, and I'd flown in to go to court. And I remember I ended up with a whole lot of cops, and we were in that pool in our underwear, which was which was pretty funny. But it was a very hot day for what I remember.
Oh yeah, November in Catherine, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing funny about it. It's just
No.
Makes beer go down well. I'll give you the
It does. Mate, actually, talking about interstaters, look, we ran into interstaters quite a bit, even outside of the job. I know I got in like the amount of networking that happens is phenomenal. Like when I was out at Borroloola, I got a call from another cop that I knew that knew a cop in Queensland that was coming up to do some fishing in Northern Territory, and they wanted somewhere to leave their boat at Borroloola, and so they got in contact with me, and we became great friends, and that was good old Brad, mate. Bradley, who we went to Glenn Fort's funeral.
Brett Fort's, yeah.
Yeah, and he got us into that. That was actually my last act as a Northern Territory police officer.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the funeral of Brett Fort in Toowoomba. We were both there.
Yep. And that it was a very touching day. But yeah, and you just talk to these people, and it's mate, you're in the same job. It might be different jurisdictions, but it's all the same shit at the end of the day. And I'll just mention another one actually, which is slightly linked to that. Poor old Brett Fort. Is the fact that I am also good friends with a guy here in Queensland who was one of the CERT officers that went out to with that incident. Who was the offender for that one?
Yeah, Ricky Madison. So we've actually got quite a bit involved in this because I knew Ricky Madison in Toowoomba. He used to be a regular at the nightclub scene in 2004, 5, 6 when I was working in the pubs and clubs in Toowoomba. And I also knew Kath Pearson, who was Brett's partner and was in the car when he was shot dead. She used to work with my father at Tilly's Crawler Parts in Toowoomba in the 90s. So I had a bit of a connection to that. That was and it was also in my old hometown. So it was a police officer killed in my hometown. I knew the offender and I knew one of the victims. So I felt very compelled to go. And by then you were living down in Brisbane. So that was why I thought we need to get you on board, mate. We need to go to this. So I spoke to the association about it, and we ended up being considered representatives. So the deputy commissioner from the NT was there as well, but we ended up being representatives of the NT as well, and we're allowed to go in uniform. So yeah, it was one of those bittersweet days. Like it was a bloody tragedy. It was a terrible thing that happened, but it's times like that when everyone gets pulled together, and the fact that our uniform was a little bit different, people would go, "Oh, who are these guys?" Because it had police written across the back, so everyone knew, well, they're coppers, but where are they from? And anyway, it was a conversation starter with a lot of people that day, and we ended up at the function afterwards at Clifford Park Racecourse, and it was it was interesting just to be there and talk, and it was just, even though we didn't know everybody, there was familiarity amongst everyone, so we were very much accepted as part of the team.
Definitely, mate. And look, for anybody that actually looks at our social media, the photo that's on our website as well of you and me, that was taken at my mum and dad's place up at Gary Junction just before we went to it.
It was too. That's right.
Yeah, so that was the last day I ever officially wore the uniform.
Yeah.
So because I was on my 12 months leave without pay at that stage. So
what do you unofficially put it on every now and then, mate? Just for
but and look, it was a very touching day that. But look, and talking, we're gonna hopefully he's actually wants to come on our podcast, the CERT guy.
Yeah.
And he actually went out. He was part of the group that went out and shot um, Ricky. And I remember him saying to me, I won't let much out of the bag, but we have had a number of beers together, and it's talking the same stuff. He did some really high level stuff, but he said when the bullets are flying, there's no tree big enough.
No.
Um, so and that really stuck with me.
Well, mate,
But
that
yeah,
the Queensland cert, they've had some pretty wild incidents in the last sort of decade, and that's one of them up there. Those vehicles coming out on bloody tilt trays the next day were just peppered with bullets. It looked like a scene out of a war zone. Because Madison was out there with old Chinese assault rifles, big 7.62 by 39 rounds. They're big, chunky bullets coming out the end, and they dealt with it. The Bearcat was right in there. The bullets were flying. It would have been a hell of a show. I mean, he obviously had made up his mind. Another point, when I told you about the negotiator course that I did down in Sydney in 2019, that particular course was run by not just the New South Wales Police, but it was combined police negotiation coordinators from a number of states, including all the states on the East Coast and the Queensland. I think his name was Pete. I can't remember his full name, but anyway, and I wouldn't mention his full name anyway. But he was heavily involved in the negotiation, and we had a bit of a chat just over dinner because I happened to be sitting with him, and I said, "Oh, I actually knew Ricky Madison." And he goes, "I've negotiated with hundreds, if not thousands, of subjects," and he said, "I've never had someone so motivated and so filled with hate in my life." He just spat hatred the whole time. He showed a little tiny bit of compassion when he found out that Brett Ford had died. And he said something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm sorry for his family." And then he just went back into a vitriol of hatred and how everyone was against him and he just hated the world and he was going to kill as many coppers as he could. And yeah, so it all went pretty wild after that. But I mean, all of that's public knowledge. It all got released in the findings. So
yeah,
but it was interesting to talk to the people who are actually there because I remember watching from afar and having been involved in situations, not to that level. Like I've never been involved in a negotiation with someone who's gone on to be shot dead by the police after spraying bullets all over the place. So that's a pretty high-end job. And then
yeah.
obviously a lot of the same blokes from CERT in Queensland would have been involved in William Biller. So
Yeah, definitely. And look, mate, I think we'll go more into depth into that. But especially once you haven't met him yet. You haven't had
no,
the opportunity. He's been very busy. But he said he's willing to. We catch up about once a month for a few beers and all that sort of thing. And it just fantastic guy.
yeah,
Just basically serving his country.
yeah,
Um, but mate, I think we're just going to move on. There's something else, and basically, it's in relation to stuff we've spoken about in the last, well, especially in the last month or so. And we mentioned Elizabeth Armitage in relation to being a magistrate and all that sort of thing. And I know you did as well, and a lot of cops do, especially when you get into either crime or prosecutions and all that. You get a lot of dealings with magistrates. Um, I I was basically the one, even when I wasn't a sergeant, it was handed to me as soon as somebody was basically looking at getting remanded. They'd hand it over to me to call the magistrate. So I did a lot of them. Even I remember the first time I did it, I shit myself. I had no idea what I was doing. And I think it was Charlie Drury, just gave me some pointers and said, go do your best. But you do learn the magistrates and how you deliver the information. Every person is different. So are magistrates. How you deliver, and it's all about knowledge of what they want to hear and how they want to hear it. Um, Mate, do you want to kick off on some of your instances, because I think the problem is a lot of magistrates, and I hear a lot in the media, they get smashed because these people get bail and they shouldn't. But what you've got to remember, it's like police. You do get some shit police from time to time. And look, magistrates are exactly the same, but you get some fantastic ones as well. I will give a quick shout out to one, and I think maybe you can start off with this one. We won't mention his name, but he was, when we had Bush Court back in the day, a lot of magistrates used to fly out to the communities. They'd basically get out there, they'd land. I think Kalkaringi was over 2 days from memory. Borroloola was over 3. And they'd come and land in the morning. They'd do court. They'd stay there the night, or somewhere else, and then they'd do the court the next day, and then they'd fly back. We had one particular magistrate who I have the utmost respect for. He was absolutely brilliant. He used to drive out to Kalkaringi and Largemanu when he was doing those courts, and he once said he likes driving out there because it puts him in the right frame of mind by seeing the road, the, say, burnt out cars on the side of the road, the cars that are tipped over, the accidents, because a lot of the cars are left there, and he said, because it just got him in the frame of mind. And you got to remember, whenever you're doing judgment, it's what's acceptable within the community of what you belong. So that does come into a bit of, I suppose, a grey area in relation to their sentencing, mate. But you want to go a bit more into that?
Yeah, so a couple of points there that you were talking about. You learn how to speak to magistrates in order to either, to seek bail and seek remand. Well, you've got to, if you're, you know what needs to be done. So you're in the community, you're the one there all the time. You know the offending that happens, and people would say, "Well, you got to sweet talk the magistrate into remanding them in custody." It's not about that. If you feel that this person needed to be remanded in custody, what you need to do is sell that to the magistrate as to why you think this person needs to be remanded in custody. You've obviously got to think like, there's escalating behaviour. This person is causing no end of drama. We're getting called out every night because of this person's conduct. The offences they've been committing are escalating, and someone's going to get badly hurt. We need to protect the community, and this person needs to be remanded in custody in order to appear at a later date. Or we feel that this person's not going to appear in court because they've got a history of non-appearance. And so you've got to really explain that to the magistrate. So it's not a matter of like doing the hard sell and lying. You can't lie. That's called perjury. It's an offence. So it's not about that. It's about selling it through the evidence that you want, why you believe this needs to occur, and doing what lawyers do. You need to convince the magistrate in law why that person should be remanded in custody or should be granted bail. A lot of the time we just said, we don't oppose bail, Your Honour. We're calling through because this person's on a warrant. So there was a little bit of a push sometimes from senior police to go, well, if you're going to bail them, you need to go and take it to a magistrate. So it's like, well, no, I'm not opposing bail, so I'm not going to take it to a magistrate because I believe he should have bail. It's like, oh, well, if he stuffs up and then he's on you. And it's like, but that's not the point. Like the evidence, it's 1 + 2 = 3. Justify your decision, and then something happened down the track. You can say, well, no, at the time the evidence said this, and therefore this person shouldn't have been remanded in custody. Because remember, custodial sentencing is a last resort. So don't get me wrong, a lot of people qualify for it, but some people don't necessarily meet that marker. So you would have to justify that. But there was a bit of a push, and that is not correct, because the only time you should really be reviewing a matter through a magistrate in order to have someone remanded is when you've made the decision to remand them in custody and they have taken up their right for review of that decision. So that's the only time you don't just ring a magistrate to get them remanded. What you're doing is you're remanding them in custody as a police sergeant, or you're refusing them bail is what you're doing. That person then, as natural justice, has the ability to review that decision of the police through the courts, and that can be done after hours in the case of a person who's potentially going to be remanded in custody. So what would happen normally, if you're in a major centre, would be that during business hours, if somebody's arrested and then refused bail, they would just go to court straight away, and that's how that works. But the other thing you mentioned there was there are some good magistrates and some bad magistrates. It's like, just because we liked magistrates who would make decisions that we didn't agree with. It was just that we liked the way they did business, because you could tell they were fair. They were really fair. They were literally doing their job. We've had lawyers who've come out and you can just tell from a mile away that they are extremely one-sided and extremely biased, and they just hate the cops and think we're the most evil thing out, and they just don't care what we say. They're going to disagree. Well, that's not being fair. That's having prejudicial conduct. That's prejudicial,
Yeah.
which is one of the biggest things that you shouldn't be when an officer of the court, which a lawyer who's in the court is. So to have a magistrate out there who would go just as hard on defence as they would on police was fine, because you could tell, you knew where you stood. It was like a really tough referee on a football game.
Yep.
You mightn't like some of the calls, but the fact of the matter is you respect the decision because it comes from a place of fairness. So that was what gained respect. It wasn't that they just, they did everything the cops wanted. No. Well, you wouldn't really respect that, because you would go, oh, this guy's a bit wishy-washy. Like, he sort of just doesn't know what he's doing. Whereas you got someone who's firm, fair, knows what, and then explains their decision-making to a T. That person's respectable, and you really, you go, they're fair dinkum, this bloke. So, or this woman, there was a couple of the women. I know one of the magistrates you spoke about before was a woman. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And look, he was incredibly fair. I've seen him, go decisions that I didn't agree with, but he was just utmost with the law, and and followed the bouncing ball, and also experience and all that sort of stuff. And look, at the end of the day, I've spoken about this before, but you also build a reputation as being a police officer. So every time you give evidence in court, every time you do a back on in the Northern Territory, specifically because it is a closer community and the magistrates do talk, and we got told that when we went through the college. So every time you submit something to court, you are building yourself a reputation. And the magistrates talk, and you build on that reputation. I was fortunate, and well, no, I wasn't saying fortunate. I was always impartial. So I would sit there and go, sometimes if the magistrate was even looking at remanding, I go, oh, Your Honour, we've got to understand this, this, and this. Yes, okay, yeah, I do understand. But I've had also cases where I remember, you ring up because the magistrates are under the pump as well. And I had one where, he goes, oh, do you want to give him bail? And I said, well, Your Honour, I'd rather get him remanded, and these are the reasons why. And he goes, okay. But you've got to remember there's a long history, and he trust my judgment because I'd never failed them before. So you do get that. I suppose it's a bit of a relationship in the sense that you're not doing anything untoward. You were just dealing with the facts and dealing with the way they are. And if they trust you on your interpretation of the law and how you think it should be affected, then they will usually take that into account when they make their decisions.
Yeah, and that reputation can be scuttled in an instant. So it's
exactly. It takes one instant.
Yeah. So it's the thing is, it's built over time of constant, just steady reliability, and that's where that reputation they'll be saying, no, well, they'd be thinking, well, I know that this sergeant in the past has made very solid decisions that I've agreed with, and I've seen all the evidence, and I agree with their decision now. The information that I'm receiving from them, inculpatory and exculpatory evidence being provided by the sergeant at this time, it is reliable in my belief, and therefore my decision is this based on these reasons. So every decision is completely reviewable, and every decision is made by weighing up balance of the matter that you're dealing with at the time. So they can be, it's not prejudicial to just go, this is a reliable witness. And that's all it really comes down to, is the fact that this sergeant has proven to this court that they are a reliable witness over many years of dealings. And should you breach that trust ever, your reliability is in the toilet, and everything will have to be proven to the nth degree. And you'll probably be considered lying until you prove yourself not to be. I mean, that happened a little bit anyway. There are other magistrates who you could just feel a level of bias against you. It was almost like there was a lot of agreement with defence lawyers who couldn't really prove anything, but yet the second that a police officer was on the stand, they were kind of assumed to be lying until they were proven not to be.
Yeah, mate. And look, you're exactly right there. There's also something that people don't understand, and it's only because I do see a lot of stuff, and magistrates do get smashed quite a bit. Why did this person get bail? And there was one recently in Queensland. But what you've got to understand, the laws the law in relation to remanding somebody in custody are fairly strict, and you've got presumptions for bail. What was it? It was for, against, and
Neutral.
neutral.
Yeah.
Yes. So, what you got to do is you got to look at the offence that they've committed, and then look at their previous offences, and then you basically they will fit in then, depending on what offence they've committed, what they've done before, what they've been convicted on before, and then you basically can work out whether it's for, neutral, or against. If it's against, it doesn't mean they're always going to get remanded. However, it's far more likely. Um,
Yeah.
like I said, I had one that was for bail, and I got him remanded, and it was from one of the most lenient magistrates in the Northern Territory. But the evidence proved that there was, what do you call it when it's reoccurring?
Yeah.
So there was potential
Continuation of the offence. Yeah.
continuation.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. So there was continuation of the offence, likely to, basically cause danger to other people. So, and all I had to do was spell that out. So you've got to, if you are actually ever calling a magistrate, if you're doing a bail consideration, just remember that that's what you're trying to prove. So even if it is for, and you think there's going to be a continuation of the offence and other people are going to be put in danger, then that's how you state it.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good example of that where something that would be considered fairly low end got someone remanded in custody and then sentenced to imprisonment fairly quickly. So I was working at a little station called Marranboy, which is on the Central Arnhem Road, for those listening anyway. So 70 kilometres south of Katherine on the Stewart Highway, you turn left and head up through Arnhem Land on what's called the Central Arnhem Road. 19 kilometres in that road is the little police station of Marranboy, and there's a couple of little communities of Barunga and Beswick further out, just a couple of k's further along. Anyway, we were patrolling one lunchtime, I think it was, and we pulled a vehicle over for a roadside breath test and just arrested the drink driver. It was medium range or whatever he was, and he was issued a notice to appear, and his family drove him away. Anyway, we were just doing our thing, and we're out and about. And we saw the same car again probably 2 hours later after we'd released this fella from, he wasn't in custody. He'd come back for the breath test and been given a notice to appear in court and gone. Anyway, we got him again. It was the same driver. And anyway, this time he went high range. He'd just gone back, kept drinking. He was driving again, having just been booked. So he then had an immediate disqualification on him. He was arrested this time, charged and bailed. So bail conditions, no further consumption of alcohol, disqualified from driving, so he couldn't drive. And the disqualification would also incur a breach of bail. So he'd have two offences if he was to be caught driving again. And then later that evening, we got called out to a job at maybe 7 o'clock at night, and we're in Barunga, and we saw the same car again. We pulled it over this time. He pulled over again. He went up. It was the same driver again, and this time he went proper high range. So I'm talking like 0.2 something. So he was arrested 3 times in one day for escalating drink driving. So the drink driving just continued to escalate. His blood alcohol went up and up and up. On the third time when he was arrested, he was also charged with drive disqualified and breach of bail. And we remanded him in custody to go into court the next day in Katherine. So we rang the magistrate, got him remanded, and then drove him into Katherine Watch House. So he spent the night there. He went to court the next morning, pled guilty to the 3 offences, and I think he got a month in jail. So that shows where that is the reason why you have to stop the offending. If you've given a person 2 strikes in the same day, escalating that behaviour, that's why it went that way. So, that's that's sort of a low-end example of how someone can get remanded in custody. A lot of it had to do with ag assault, breach DVO, that old chestnut, committing a serious violence offence, having been previously charged with a serious violence offence in a domestic setting, blah, blah, blah. There was all these different considerations under the Bail Act, and that was what you weighed the evidence against in order to make your decision. So it was all pretty spelled out. You just if you hit what you needed to hit with the evidence, that's how you sold it, basically.
Yeah. Well, mate, I know Dingle and I actually got a guy remanded once in Katherine, and of course it was only overnight until the next day, in relation to driving unlicensed.
Yeah.
Because in court, I think it was 6 or 7 times in the last 6 months, driving unlicensed, and he had complete disregard for the law.
Yeah.
And we actually got information. He was saying in the court cells on that day, through the auxiliaries who we've mentioned previously, they passed back some information to us that the fact this guy was in there going, oh, "This is bullshit. I'm going to go and drive again." So we actually had police officers after he pleaded guilty and got his fine, and as soon as he left the courthouse, they were sitting there just watching to see if he drove a car again. He didn't. He was obviously talking himself up, but it's that continuation of the offence because driving unlicensed, you're putting other people's lives in danger. He had total disregard for the law. One of the other ones was I was actually out at I can't even remember the community. I was actually out there visiting, helping out more with it was community action safety plans. So I basically another officer that was in from Darwin. They didn't have much experience as being an OIC, and they asked me to come down and help them out setting up this community action safety plan, which was all brought in under the intervention. And we will go more into that because Elizabeth Armitage did mention something along those lines, and it's something that's already been done and hasn't been overly successful. But I was out there and in conversations with them, because I had to stay overnight, in conversations with them, they said, they had this young youth offender that was, causing some troubles and all that sort of thing. He'd been breaking in and getting kids to sniff and, basically, and he was only 12, I think, at the time, or 13. But he was getting kids as young as 8 and 10 into basically unlawful entry. So 8, they're not criminally held criminally responsible, but however, they were sniffing volatile substances, which is extremely dangerous. So I said, all right, okay. And they said, every time we go and try and get him, he runs and all that sort of thing. And I said, well, okay, we're getting up at 4 a.m. Let's go to his place and let's grab him. He had 2 warrants for apprehension. And that's because, for means warrants they were, because he had failed to show up to court twice before on similar offending. So we had clear entry to go and arrest him into a house. We went in and grabbed him. But as he was sleeping in his bed, we brought him in and got him remanded in custody. And they asked me to do the call because, of course, my experience in actually talking to magistrates, and I knew how to deliver the evidence. And that was one of the ones that he was for bail. However, the danger he was posing to those young children, even though he was a child himself, was extremely dangerous. Sniffing volatile substances, we dealt with it. I know you dealt with it quite a bit down in the southern regions. I dealt with it, or even out at Marramboy, I suppose it was a little bit out there. In Arnhem Land, it was pretty prevalent as well. Not so much for petrol, but other volatile substances like paint and all that sort of thing. I had one stage when I was out at Millingimby where the doctor did an assessment on these kids that we'd caught, and he said if they actually sniffed again, within a certain amount of time frame, they could potentially die.
Yeah.
So this is, so if you look at the police and going, oh, geez, they're going really hard on this person, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
We don't really want to send everybody to jail, but however, we've got to protect the community, and that's our job.
Yeah.
And that's also the magistrate's job. So that's how you deliver that sort of, I suppose, information to the magistrate to basically, it's all about protection of the community and also, even protection of that person.
This relates to many different walks of life. So it's always the way people go, how do you sell that same? It's it's the sales of it, and it's not about convincing. It is convincing them, but it's not about tricking them into it. It's about showing the evidence that you believe does this. I'll give you an example. So right now, I'm in the middle of. I've just finished doing some group leader training with the Rural Fire Service down in New South Wales, and one of the things that we were learning was we were requesting aircraft. In our little scenarios that we were doing, there was a fire approaching. It was going to impact what we call that urban interface. So fire was about to impact towns. And we were requesting large air tankers, so big aircraft full of retardant that are very expensive, to come and run retardant along that interface to protect houses and save life and property inside actual dwellings and things like that. And the reason, what they were saying to us, you've got to sell it. You've got to, because they have to make a very big decision to send that aircraft there. And if they waste that, if it's not required there and it is required somewhere else in a fire season, then there's the potential for, they've got to balance that resource. There's the potential for somewhere else to suffer because you've wasted the resource. So they said you need to really learn how to communicate your information. And I found it a natural progression. I thought of it exactly like that. It's a matter of, you've got to tick all the boxes of the evidence as to why you need that resource to come there. Protection of, imminent threat to life, protection of property, no other way of doing it. So there's a lot of these checklists that you go through in a lot of different walks of life, but it's all very similar. So you can apply, it's a transferable skill. So I now transfer, I'm obviously not a police officer anymore, but I'm now, potentially a group leader in the fireys. So as a result, if I want to call in that level of resource, I've got to convince the powers that be higher up as to why that resource is required. And you just go through the same motions. Look, we believe this fire is going to impact. Here's the information. Here's the fire behaviour. Here's the rate of spread. Here's the defendability of these properties through other means. It's not there. We don't, they've got trees up to their buildings, all this sort of stuff. The last line of defence for us will be fireys standing behind these houses, using them as shields, basically as the fire front impacts, and then we go around the back and try and protect the property. But if we lay a line of retardant there, it will halt or slow the advance of that fire. So it's the same thing. It's exactly the same. This is what I keep saying. The similarities are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's just about, you can apply it to a civilian job. It's you want to ask for a raise if you're an employee in any sector, and say, well, look, I've as per my key performance indicators, I've done this, I've done that, I've done that. Other industries are paying this for this kind of thing. I've provided this much income for the company, blah, 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 blah. And you argue the point as to why you're worth more money. So it's that, not just going, oh, I want more, I want this to happen. It's like, remove the emotion and apply evidence and show why, and make the decision, show them that they make the decision.
Yep. Mate, you've actually brought up a very good point, and it's something that a lot of people ask me, even since I've left the police, and they have a problem with somebody, and it could be anything. It could be a neighbourhood dispute. Doesn't really matter what it is. But I always sit there, it could be potential domestic situation. I always sit there and go, time, date, place, state it, put it down in a notebook. Please use their notebooks, because that builds evidence. It builds history. And so every time, if you can go before someone and you want to prove something, you go, on this date, at this time, this person did this.
Yes.
And then you go, 2 days later, at this time, on this date, this person did this. It's all about creating history. And that's how police do a lot of their investigations. So even, like you said, it doesn't matter what field you live in or, what job you're doing, build evidence.
Yeah.
Because it also, it doesn't only get your desired result, it protects you. Because, they can throw whatever they want at you, and you go, well, hold on a minute. I've got all this documentation that I've jotted down, and that's our notes at the time, and that's evidence. And I'll just give another quick example before we finish up. I had one where they were, we had a whole lot of cars getting stolen from Sin City, and they were obviously trying to run down, and they were coming through Catherine. And I was training at the moment. I was a training officer for this guy that wanted to become a detective, and he did become a detective, and a very, very good one, which I'm quite proud to say. But it was a lot of his work. He was very, very dedicated to what he wanted to do. So we used to take a lot of the cases where they'd steal cars and they come down through Catherine and all that sort of stuff. And this one particular offender obviously had a car accident in Catherine, and we were dealing with him. However, the presumption was he was a flight risk because he was trying to head out of WA. So that's a big red tick for him. However, to back it up, I actually asked the officer, I said, all right, there's a number of instances where he's been the nominated offender. However, there's been nil complaint forthcoming. And I said, list them all. I said, because when I speak to the magistrate, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to sit there and go, Your Honour, here's a flight risk. These are the reasons. However, unfortunately, because there are times when victims don't want to press charges. There are also times, and I do apologise, some police, especially for low-level offending, they will talk to the victim, and especially for shop stealing or shoplifting, whatever you want to call it, that there'll be no complaint forthcoming. However, they've shown a history of doing this sort of behaviour.
Yeah.
And so we did get remanded, basically showing he was a flight risk, but also we backed it up the fact that he'd been nominated, I think it was 15 or 20 times in the last 6 months of these offences. However, he's never been brought before the court because he was never there was no complaint forthcoming.
Yeah, and so under the Bail Act, that information can be taken into consideration. Well, that would never be admissible in a court for criminal offending, but it's certainly admissible while you're carrying out what's called a bail consideration. So, it's certainly information to the magistrate that also supports your argument. So there's no issue with providing that information.
Yeah, so that it's just another for people going into it. You can use that, and it's something important. So I mean, actually, you know what? You've given me another idea, and we'll have to talk about this in another one. But something we've never really spoken about is interviews. When you're interviewing offenders, because you and I have, how many thousands?
Oh yeah, lots.
Yeah. And look, I've got some pretty memorable ones. When you're going through.
We have spoken about it in the conducting investigations really, really early.
Did we?
Yeah, a long time ago. But yeah, we've been doing this a long time now, so we've spoken about a lot of stuff.
Mate, we're up to 82 episodes, mate. Can you believe it?
Unbelievable, yeah. Yeah. That'll probably get us close to an end.
Oh, yeah, mate, definitely. We're up to 51 minutes, and you were saying when we started this one, it'll be a short one. However, but it's just one of those things, mate. As soon as you start talking and the memories come back, and somebody mentioned me the other day, and they said, "Oh, how do you come up with this stuff?" And I said, "It is amazing how much we fit into a short period of time of our life."
Yeah,
talking about policing, because the stories are actually never ending, and the justification of why we did what we did, like you said, you start talking about it and suddenly the memories start coming back and you're going, oh, shit, I remember this case. I remember this case. This is stuff we haven't thought about in, 15 years?
Yeah.
Mate. Anything else you want to add before we finish up, Damo?
Well, I'm just trying to think if I've heard any cartons of the week. No one's done anything ridiculously stupid. Not my end anyway. I haven't heard of any police doing anything silly. I haven't really looked at any news though, but yeah, look, that's the big one. We need to have cartons of the week, guys. Let us know. All emergency services and defence. Listen, Exercise Talisman Sabre just wrapped up. So anyone who was on that and hasn't been listening for a while and you're listening again now, if one of the dig dogs did something silly, let us know. We won't have to name anybody, but we can issue a carton and we'll just say Private X did this while on Talisman Sabre, and as a result, carton from the two ordinary cops.
Yep, definitely.
And obviously all the emergency services, let us know.
Yep, I do actually recall once. I'd try and get a carton out of anybody for anything. But because it was always good to catch up in the police club. And however, it doesn't stop you. I was just a Connie in Catherine, and I told the commander once that they owed a carton because they actually were on TV. And look, they're on TV quite a bit, but that's a cartonable offence.
To her credit, she paid it.
She did. Yes, she did. Yeah. And so you don't be afraid. To go up a few ranks. If they do something, if they're on TV, if they're in the paper, that's a cartonable offence.
Yeah.
So
actually, I'll buy a carton for a sergeant or below who goes to an executive member of their particular jurisdiction. That's a carton, sir. Saw you on the news last night.
Yeah.
So that's not real fair. I give a bloody daily update to the media. What do you mean? It's like, oh, are you challenging the carton, sir?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Look, maybe one of these episodes we'll have to go through the rules of what a cartonable offence is.
Yeah.
Because
Oh no, we
it's
just make them up. We don't have to. This is not legislation. We're
no,
dictators, so it's all good.
yeah, well, yeah, that's right. We are the kangaroo court, mate. By
Yeah.
after all, so
Self-appointed. Yeah. Very good. Well, I reckon that'll wrap us up for the week. And thanks again. And we'll talk to you again all very soon. What do you reckon, Schultzy?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, time to finish up. But yeah, thanks again. And remember, next week we will be talking about. Hopefully, I'll have a location for the 18th of October. I think it's going to be a cracking day. We have not. Every time we've done something similar in the past, it's never been a letdown. That's for
Always
sure.
exceeded expectations.
Yeah, that's right. And considering we're two ordinary cops, that's not too bad.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
So, but yeah, for everybody listening, thanks again for listening. Thanks for the support, and we'll see you all next week.